There's a region on Pluto called Cthulhu. It's named after a creature, a fictional one, invented by a broke, reclusive writer from Rhode Island who died in 1937. He never owned a car, never traveled outside the eastern United States, and never earned enough from his writing to pay his own rent. NASA named a region of Pluto after this man's imagination. It's not a metaphor for influence, it's just what happened. Howard Phillips Lovecraft was born in Providence, Rhode Island in 1890 into a family already bending under the weight of its own strangeness. His father developed severe psychosis when Lovecraft was 3 years old. He was institutionalized at Butler Hospital, where he would die 5 years later. His mother, increasingly unstable herself, raised him in sheltered isolation. She was eventually institutionalized at the same hospital in 1919. Lovecraft grew up surrounded by bad health and a family quietly unraveling. He was a brilliant kid, a voracious reader, obsessed with astronomy and chemistry. Taught himself advanced mathematics, wrote astronomy columns for local papers as a teenager, and then essentially collapsed under the weight of anxiety and illness. He dropped out of high school and spent most of his 20s doing almost nothing, writing letters, reading, barely leaving the house. He was virtually unknown during his lifetime, almost exclusively published in pulp magazines before his death. He briefly married and moved to New York. He hated it with a ferocity, and it would bleed into his work. Returned to Providence to live out his remaining years in his aunt's house. He lacked the confidence and drive to promote himself, and commercial success increasingly eluded him. He died of cancer on March 15th, 1937, in Providence, Rhode Island, at the age of 46. At the time, he was known within maybe a few hundred people's reading circles, a minor figure in pulp fiction, a weird guy who wrote weird stories for weird magazines. Here's what he left behind: 60-odd short stories, a handful of novellas, and an idea so powerful that it would eventually outlive him by decades and show no signs of stopping. The idea was, we are not the point. Most horror, historically, is about monsters that want something from you. The vampire wants your blood. The killer wants revenge. The demon wants your soul. And there's a relationship. You matter to the thing that's threatening you. You're the target, which means, on some level, you're important. Lovecraft threw that out entirely. His major inspiration and invention was cosmic horror, the basic premise of which is that true workings of the universe are beyond human comprehension, and that humanity's place in the cosmos is terrifyingly insignificant. He called his personal philosophy cosmicism. The universe is incomprehensibly vast, incomprehensibly old, and utterly indifferent to human existence. There are forces and entities out there so far beyond our scale of understanding that encountering one wouldn't even register as a confrontation. It would register as nothing, like an ant on the sidewalk noticing a skyscraper. Cthulhu, his most famous creation, isn't evil in the traditional sense. It doesn't hate you. It doesn't want to destroy you specifically. It is a powerful extraterrestrial entity that influences or threatens the human world in subtle ways, and whose mere perception by human observers often drives the latter to madness. That's the actual horror, not the monster. The realization that the monster doesn't even register that you exist. This is philosophically interesting because Lovecraft wasn't just writing horror. He was working through a genuine worldview. He'd grown up reading about Darwin, about deep geological time, about the expanding universe. He understood at a bone level that humanity's entire recorded history was a blink in cosmic time, that the Earth would outlast us, that the universe operated on scales that made human concerns like love, ambition, war, and legacy essentially invisible. Most people respond to that realization by looking away from it. Lovecraft stared directly at it and wrote it down. A quote of his, "The oldest and strongest emotion of mankind is fear, and the oldest and strongest kind of fear is the fear of the unknown." That's not a horror writer's tagline, that's a philosophical position. That's a man saying, the thing that drives us most fundamentally is our confrontation with what we cannot comprehend. Which, look around. He wasn't entirely wrong. Here's where we have to stop and be honest about something. Lovecraft was a racist. Not in, it was a different time, hand wave kind of way, in a documented, explicit, writings full of it way. He held virulent anti-Semitic views. He wrote letters with language that would make you put the page down. He had a cat whose name I won't repeat here, but whose name he used openly in his correspondence. It's been argued that his phobia of non-white faces influenced his work itself. With his tales of the nameless forces and unknowable aliens, it's not too much of a stretch to think Lovecraft was channeling his feelings toward New York's multicultural population. The World Fantasy Award, one of the most prestigious prizes in genre fiction, used to feature a bust of Lovecraft's face as a trophy. And then in 2016, after author Nnedi Okorafor won and pointed out how troubling it was, they replaced it. How do you hold all of that? Here's my honest answer. You don't resolve it, you hold the tension. Because what happened next makes the whole story more interesting. The mythology Lovecraft created was taken up by writers, artists, and creators from all over the world, including many from communities Lovecraft himself would have feared or dismissed. They took his ideas, cosmic horror, unknowable entities, humanity's insignificance, and expanded them, subverted them, and reclaimed them. Other authors joined in the world building, adding dark gods, strange races of creatures, myth cycles, lost artifacts, more forbidden tomes, until together they created a vast and rich narrative universe, effectively an open source universe. The mythology outgrew the man who made it, which is honestly the most Lovecraftian thing that could have happened. He was afraid of forces larger than himself, and then he became one to his own creation. Let's talk about what actually happened to his mythology after Lovecraft died with nothing. Two of his friends, August Derleth and Donald Wandry, formed a publishing company called Arkham House to promote and preserve Lovecraft's work. That single act of friendship kept the whole thing alive through the 1940s and 50s, when it might otherwise have dissolved entirely. Then the 1970s arrived and something shifted. Lovecraft's work found a scholarly revival, new readers, new editions, and from there, an avalanche. He's been an inspiration to such writers as Peter Straub, Stephen King, Neil Gaiman, George R.R. Martin, Jorge Luis Borges, Douglas Adams, and more writers spanning horror, fantasy, literary fiction, and comedy, all citing the same Baroque recluse from Rhode Island as a foundational influence. Then it jumped media entirely. Stranger Things incorporated Lovecraftian elements. The alternate dimensions and monstrous entities echo the unsettling atmosphere of Lovecraft's stories. The Mind Flayer, the thing your kids or young siblings were scared of, is basically Cthulhu with a Netflix budget. True Detective Season 1, one of the most acclaimed seasons of television's recent memory, is soaked in Lovecraftian dread. The philosophical monologues, the sense of ancient evil, the feeling that the universe doesn't care about the investigation. The insane villains of Gotham City and the Batman stories are incarcerated in Arkham Asylum, Arkham being an invention of Lovecraft's. Every time you watch or read Batman, you're inside Lovecraft's geography. The video game Bloodborne is essentially a Lovecraft story you play through, Dark Souls draws on the same aesthetic of ancient indifferent gods and human insignificance, the entire Souls genre. One of the most influential game design movements of the last 15 years is just downstream of cosmicism. The Alien franchise, the horror of an incomprehensible entity that doesn't register you as a threat, is pure Lovecraftian logic. Cloverfield, The Mist, The Cabin in the Woods, the entire found footage horror genre owes a significant structural debt to the idea that the camera can't capture what we're seeing, which is exactly how Lovecraft's narrators always describe the monsters. His work has penetrated pop culture so much that you can even buy plush toys of his creepiest monsters like Cthulhu. You can buy a soft, huggable version of a creature designed to represent humanity's total irrelevance in a cold and indifferent universe, and it sells. Constantly. That's not a legacy, I don't know what is. Lovecraft didn't try to write for everyone, he wrote for himself about exactly the things that obsessed him. Cosmic time, astronomical scale, the horror of the incomprehensible. He had one idea and he went deep into it instead of wide. Everything that's lasted has done this. The creators who try to appeal to everybody usually end up meaning nothing to anyone. The ones who go specific, who build a fully realized world of their own obsessions, end up speaking to everyone precisely because they weren't trying to. Lovecraft explicitly encouraged his friends to use his mythology, his gods, his place names in their own work. Robert E. Howard, the creator of Conan the Barbarian, was in the circle. Robert Bloch, who wrote Psycho, they all borrowed from and added to the mythos. One of the most interesting things has been how a circle of writers all borrowed from each other's names, places, and beings for their own work, creating, in effect, an open source universe. By making his mythology collaborative and open, Lovecraft ensured it couldn't die with him. It had too many custodians. It was alive in too many other people's imaginations to disappear when his did. Think about what this means for anything you're building. If you can make other people feel like it's theirs too, if you can invite contribution instead of protecting ownership, you can build something that doesn't depend on you. Lovecraft was not a flawless writer. His prose was often overwrought. His characters were thin. His plotting was sometimes incoherent. Critics in his own time called him derivative, florid, and self-indulgent. He was middling. But the idea was extraordinary. The concept of cosmic horror, a fear rooted in the scale and indifference rather than malice, was truly new. Nobody had quite thought about it that way before. And that idea was so compelling that it survived the imperfect execution, found better writers to carry it forward, and grew into something its original author could have never imagined. You don't always need perfect execution. You need a real idea, a true one that captures something people feel but haven't seen named yet. Get that right, and the execution improves over time as others pick it up. Lovecraft was, by many accounts, a difficult, fearful, and in some ways genuinely ugly human being. His worst impulses were real, and they caused real harm to how he wrote about people, to the culture of the community that grew around him. But the ideas he generated, cosmic humility, the smallness of human certainty, the terror of the unknown, those ideas carried forward by better people have produced some of the most humane and thoughtful speculative fiction of the last century. Writers who came after him took the fear and found wisdom in it instead of hatred. They took the acknowledgement of human smallness and made it an argument for compassion rather than hierarchy. The mythology did what the man couldn't. In 1977, Lovecraft's disciples pooled their funds to purchase a headstone, inscribing it with the phrase, "I am Providence," taken from one of Lovecraft's letters. He had died 40 years earlier with no headstone at all. There's a region on Pluto called Cthulhu. There are Batman movies set in a city he invented. There are video games built on his philosophy. There are plush toys of his monsters. There are writers working today all over the world in languages he never read, building on a mythology he started alone in a rented room in Providence. with no expectation that anyone would ever care. He was afraid of everything: the dark, foreigners, the cold, the vastness of space, his own insignificance. And somehow, out of all that fear, he built something the universe itself decided to remember. And that's the strange, complicated, and remarkable story of H.P. Lovecraft.